Hey everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy, I'm the host of the show, and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. Although right now, well, I'm recording this in advance, but if you're listening to this when it comes out, physically right now I'm in New York. Oh, the games we play with temporal positioning. Anyway, I hope things are going well for you, dear listener. I hope nothing terrible has happened in the world in the time since I recorded this, so that maybe I'll say something accidentally and then they'll be like, hey, whatever you said that punched an old woman in the subways in New York, and now you look insensitive. You know, sometimes you gotta take some risks, though, when you are making art or speaking off the cuff in the introduction to your podcast. And what an episode this is. This is Joe Jack Talcum. If you don't know who that is, why don't I read you his bio right now. Originally from Wagontown, Pennsylvania, Joe Gennaro, a.k.a. Joe Jack Talcum, is the guitarist and co-lead singer of the seminal punk band The Dead Milkmen. Formed out of his home recording project dating back to the late 70s, the group didn't really coalesce until Joe went to college at Temple University, my grad school alma mater. That's not in the bio, by the way. Starting with 1985's Big Lizard in My Backyard, they recorded dozens of albums and EPs, and though they broke up in 1995, they've reunited a number of times since for various shows. Outside of the Dead Milkmen, Joe is prolific, recording a number of albums on his own and with groups like The Low Budgets. His latest album, Joe Jack Talcum Sings Railroad Bill and Other Songs, was just released late last year. You can get it on his Bandcamp. I recommend it. This was exciting. I actually recorded this a while ago, and I've been holding on to it because I was worried about the sound, and anytime I'm worried about the sound, I just push it off until later. You know, that's healthy. Whenever you have something you're worried about, it's always good to just push it out of your brain and not deal with it. But the sound was great. It sounded very good, so I was pleasantly surprised. And Joe's a real sweetheart. He's a kind of shy, quiet dude, but I think we got into some interesting stuff in this episode. By the way, if this is your first time listening to Beginnings, thank you for checking out the show. I've been doing it for 11 years. Episode 500 coming up soon. What I like to do here in the beginning is a little recommended if you like today's guest. Maybe you'll like some of these other interviews I've done. I've talked to many, many musicians over the years. You know, Colin Newman from Wire, Arto Lindsay, Ian Mackay, Matt Pryor from the Get Up Kids, Mac McCon from Superchunk. So if you like this episode, you might like those. You know, the last 100 are on whatever app you use. All of them should be on Spotify for whatever reason. But if you like what you hear and you want to subscribe to the show, you can do that wherever you get your podcast from. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Andy Beckerman. Got some great episodes coming up. Robert Popper next week, just a brilliant British comedy writer. Bill Oakley, one of the early Simpsons writers, that's coming up. So stay tuned for those. But for now, let's talk to Joe. Thanks for doing this, by the way.
You're welcome. Thank you. Andrew?
I'm excited. I mean, I'm excited for many reasons, but I always love talking to people from Pennsylvania because I grew up in Reading. And,
I know where that is.
Yeah. I mean, you're from outside of Philly, right?
Chester County.
Yeah. Like, what part did you grow up in, though?
Wagontown, Coatesville.
Oh, yeah, Coatesville. I know that. I think my dad worked there for a little while.
In a steel mill? No.
He worked.
Lutens.
He worked. I don't know. My dad did one of the, like, he switched careers, like, halfway through. And to something, to, like, and there was, like, a period of time where I'm like, I'm not exactly sure what you do for a living.
So he was secretive. Maybe he was in the CIA, you know?
I wish. Well, no, I don't wish that. CIA has done horrible things. No, but it was just like vaguely business. I don't know if you had that kind of like what relationship you had with your parents, but like the stuff that I like, my mom was easy. She was an English teacher that I could understand. But when it came to like business, I'm just like, it's just vague. He's does something in business, and I'm not sure what.
Yeah, it's something. Well, I don't have time to explain it, and you'll never understand it, kind of thing. Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. What did your parents do?
They were both teachers. They both taught elementary school age children.
Any like particular, like my mom was an English teacher, or were they just like?
It was elementary school teaching was a little bit of everything. It was general education.
I mean, how large, how big is is Coatesville where you mainly grew up?
Yes.
How big is it? Like, what kind of like town is it? What's the vibe when you were growing up? What's the vibe there?
It was the 70s. We had our school pride, just like sports teams and whatnot. It felt to me progressive education wise compared to what I look back on how education is these days, or what I perceive it to be from the little bit I know. So let's see, I'm looking at the population chart. Right now, the population's at 13,114, but that's in 2020. Where was it in 1978, let's say? I don't know if I'm going to find this in the census code.
But it was like a fairly small place to grow up.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It was the only place I grew up. It seemed large enough to me.
I do think it's interesting, though, that, like, I've been thinking about this a lot more lately. Like, in my mind, again, I was a baby at the time, but, like, in my mind, the Reagan era transforms America. Like, you saying that, like, education...
I was out of high school by then.
Yeah. I mean, could you feel it? Was there a change, or am I just making that up? Like,
no, there was a change. You're not making that up. We saw it in popular culture, even. The Dead Milkmen were rocking against Reagan when we first started.
Yeah, that seemed to fuel...
part of the things we did.
It seemed like that, the change in America, whatever it was, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about it, but like it seemed like that change fueled the punk movement of the time.
Yeah, it was specifically there. I mean, they were bands like Reagan Youth.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of satire back then as well. Sometimes people didn't get it. Sometimes they did. Like that.
I mean, that's always what drew me to your music,
like
I think, was that you had a sense of humor.
Yeah, we did. That was intentional.
I mean, growing up, like, did you grow up in like was your family funny? Were your friends funny?
Yeah. We had a lot of humor here in Wagontown. I had funny neighbors.
How so?
Yeah, we were a funny family. We laughed a lot. We watched funny shows on TV, like Monty Python.
Okay.
Get Smart. Gets the Carol Burnett Show.
Yeah. So they introduced you to the good stuff early on.
Through television. There was a lot of TV watching going on.
When I asked like what the like vibe was, I guess what I meant was like I was kind of when I was growing up, I was really oblivious to kind of like how things were felt. I lived a lot of my time in my head, and I wasn't really paying much attention to like I grew up in like the suburbs of Reading. It was like a pretty like when I like think back on it for real though, it was just very flat. I think everyone kind of like kept to themselves. There wasn't a real sense of community outside of my temple.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, did you grow up in a place like, was there a sense of community there?
Yeah, there was a sense of community in the 70s. We had Little League baseball games. We had church picnics. I still think there is a sense of community. So when I was growing up, Coatesville's population was actually a little bit less than it is now. It was 12. What did I say it was now?
13,000 something.
Yeah, it was on the decline for sure. All throughout the 70s. By the time I graduated high school, it was 10,698, according to the census.
But you felt like a sense of community there. You felt like it was I mean, look, there was community. I'm not like trying to paint it as if it was like I grew up in this kind of like the psychopathic kind of society we live in now, where everyone is totally on their own. Like there was still a sense of some kind of community, but you could start to feel that kind of Reaganism.
Well, I think, I think people started to distrust each other because of child abductions and stuff like that, and the milk carton kids. You know, that was in the wet 80s.
Oh,
I was out of here by the 80s. Yeah, that's when that stuff started, as far as I remember.
You were already in Philadelphia then.
Yeah, so
like what?
Not that we didn't have milk cartons. We had those in Philadelphia too, but we were outside. I left the suburbs and had a different kind of cultural experience.
Was that a big shift for you, or did you kind of just...
At first it was, but it was a welcome one. I liked it.
Yeah. What was... when you were growing up, like, what were your parents like?
I guess they were kind of Democrat, liberal, church-going. One half, my dad was Catholic, my mom was Lutheran, so they went to different churches. They met as teachers. My mom became a substitute teacher while raising a family. My dad remained a teacher up until retirement. I know him to be a teacher, a gardener, and an encyclopedia salesman. He's also
really?
a census worker too.
Really?
Yeah. So he was a door-to-door kind of guy when he wasn't teaching.
That seems so particularly like there's certain like teacher. It's just like, yeah, any era. I mean, obviously the technology changes, but like there is something consistent about being a teacher in any age. Whereas like the idea of like selling encyclopedia, like a door-to-door encyclopedia salesman, seems like such a like post-war America, so specific to that time period.
Yeah, I imagine with the internet the sales have declined, but we still have a set of the World Book Encyclopedia.
Yeah, I grew up with World Book.
Yeah, so did I.
I mean, I would sit there and just page through looking at, like, I remember very specifically there's a section on, I think, like, just anatomy, and you could peel back. It was these kind of, like, transparent
those
layers.
were really cool. I liked all the transparent layers pages.
Yeah, and you go from the skin to the muscle to the bone to the nervous system to the...
Oh, yeah, that was pretty fascinating.
Like, were you a kid? Were you, like,
I learned how records were made from World Book. I was fascinated with that. I learned how they work.
Was that the kind of kid you were? Did you sit there and just like page through like I was a kid. I did stuff with my friends, but I spent a lot of time like on my own reading. I was kind of an introvert.
Yes, indeed.
Do you remember like specifically what the kinds of things you were reading at the time were, or like what you were really into?
I was into records. So, and everything I wanted to read that I saw was more information about not only records, but music and musicians, and specifically Bob Dylan. In 8th grade, after reading a book about the Byrds, the Byrds birds, I found out about Bob Dylan, and I became kind of more or less obsessed with getting every single thing he ever made on record somehow. And also the Beatles, pretty much around that same exact time in my life.
Was there something particular about that time in your life that like you suddenly became obsessed with music, or was it just...
Well, I can't remember a time in my life where I was not obsessed with music. My dad had a record player, and he had a record collection that I probably played with more than he did at some point. And my parents got me my own record player, so I would stop messing with his hi-fi system.
Yeah, we had the same kind of setup. My parents had like a nice record player and a bunch of records, and then they eventually got me like one of those ones where you like the plastic ones where you flip the top up.
So I was really into those, and my dad didn't have any pop music at all. He was a classical music collector. But my uncle got me 45s that would have otherwise been discarded by the jukebox people, because I think he managed or worked, or he had some kind of relationship to I think it was a bar. It might have been a private club or something where he was a bartender. But he got them to let him have the 45s that would come out of the jukebox, and gave them to me. I remember specifically certain moments of my life where my uncle, who has now passed away, but I remember receiving these and being excited for what they would sound like, and some of them became favorites, and some I discarded myself. But I was very fascinated with music.
Was it something specific, or did it just, I'm trying to think about like because I also was obsessed with music when I was younger. And for me, I think it was something about that it was expressing something I couldn't express.
Yeah, I can't tell you why, but at some point I wanted to also make my own music. And we also had a piano in our house. And since I apparently was interested in it, like lots of kids would, say, my parents gave me piano lessons, so I was lucky there. I remember with part of the lessons was to write on sheet. That's how I wrote little jingle as part of an assignment. I remember that vaguely.
Do you remember what it was like? I mean, there are plenty of people who are obsessive about music that don't go on to make their own music. Do you remember what it was in you that was like, this isn't just like something I'm interested in watching other people do. I want to do this myself.
I wanted to write songs, and originally I wanted to write songs, and I didn't really care about being a performer. And one of the incentives was because I read that songwriters earn money on every record that gets made. And I thought, well, that could be a good occupation, and I wouldn't have to. I was also a very shy person when I was younger, much shyer than I am now. But I thought I wouldn't have to worry about anybody knowing me too well, and I could still influence people through music somehow. I also didn't think I was very good as a musician. In fact, I didn't go to college for music. I went for communications, radio, television, film instead, even though deep in my heart I would have rather gone for music, but I really didn't think I would pass any audition to get into a music school. But I still thought I could write songs.
Yeah. No, I know, and I kind of also know that shyness. I think it took me a long time to kind of, here's a dumb example, but like my temple had a talent show when I was 15, and this was like I was in the middle, maybe even 14. I was really into Nirvana at the time, so this is like 92 or 93.
Okay.
And I got some friends together and we practiced some Nirvana song from Bleach, Floyd the Barber, and I was gonna sing it. And then we went to we played it. We're in front of my temple, and I go to play it, and I literally could not get the words out. So we start playing, and I just by the way, it's a really boring, repetitive song if there's no one singing. It's just the same chugging kind of chords over and over again. And I remember that, I can still call the feeling up in my body. I can still think about that and still feel the same kind of embarrassment and shyness that I felt then. It took me a long time to get over it.
Yeah. Yeah, I had stage fright too. But when punk came along, it gave me, for some reason, because I guess the way it was portrayed also in the media, it gave me a psychological edge within myself that I thought, I could pull this off. You don't have to be a virtuoso.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something about that I remember when I first started getting into punk where it's just it felt like there was something like very democratic or egalitarian about it. It's like, oh, this is something anyone can do, and anyone can express themselves through this.
Yeah, and then like when you go to a show and you'll see, oh, I can talk to these people after the show, I can become friends with them, and then you become part of a scene, and lo and behold, bands, like you just go see someone, it's, why can't you be in a band? That's kind of like the path to I can do this too, because this person's doing it, and they're just like me. I mean, in a lot of ways.
So you're going to shows in what are shows? Are you going into
early
Philly?
80s.
In the early 80s?
Yeah,
so you're
because
in Philly
I lived
already.
in Philly. I lived in Philly. I was going to Temple University there, starting in 1980.
I went to Temple for grad school.
When I was 18, pretty much. Yeah, how did you like it?
I liked it a lot. I lived in South Philly, and so I took a long train ride up.
You took the Broad Street line?
Yeah. Took the Orange line up.
The Orange line. See, when I first moved to Philly, there weren't colors yet. Anyway.
When I first started going to shows in Reading, they had like basement shows. They had like these, or like fire hall shows, or like shows at the VFW.
Yep. Oh, yeah, VFW. I've been to many shows in VFWs. Fire halls, yes, check that one. Basements, yes, check that one.
Yeah.
These were all happening in the 80s, too. Elks Club, probably my first punk show was in an Elks Club in South Philly. And all the bands were local.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Stickmen were like the Stickmen were on the bill, and they're the ones they're the band I remember the most. They really impressed me. I forget all the other names right now, but anyway.
But like when you first started going to these shows, did it open up something in you?
A desire to be on the stage. Probably more than anything else, because I still had yet to be in a band, except that I made up a fake band that Rodney and I wrote real music for. So I guess I didn't make up a fake band to write songs expecting that particular fake band to become a real band, although that's what happened. But when I did see my first punk rock show, I did want to be in a band. I didn't really put two and two together and say, oh, a band called the Dead Milkmen could do this.
Mm. I mean, what made I'm trying to think about, when I was like very shy and couldn't really express myself. I'm really trying to like put myself back in that place to think about like where you were too. What was the thing that made you make that leap? Was it just like seeing other people play music, or was there something else that changed where you're like, oh, now I have the courage to really like what changed the Dead Milkmen from a fake band that you were writing music for to a real band you were writing music for?
Meeting Dave Schulteis, also known as Dave Blood. I met his brother at Temple, and this was after I'd seen some punk shows. Dave probably, he was definitely instrumental in pushing me towards this. We could really make a band. All we need is a drummer, really, and a singer. But we already had a singer. It's just that he hadn't. Well, Dave was not shy by any means, and he was a pragmatist. He also had gone to Temple University before me. He was 6 years older than me. So, yeah, he said it could happen, and why not try? So we auditioned drummers, and once we found Dean, I'm pretty sure he was the third person that we had drum for us, and we couldn't believe how good it clicked. Dean was really the person then that cemented us as the Dead Milkmen, as far as that band name goes, because he was the one that said, no, you have to keep this name from the... We gave him some cassettes that had songs. Dave and I played music. Dave learned some of the songs that Rodney and I wrote together, some of the songs that I wrote by myself as well, and also became a songwriting partner. And Rodney was still a songwriting partner too. So back then Rodney wrote lyrics predominantly. He didn't start writing music until a little bit later. But Rodney would send us lyrics in the mail. Well, he would send them to me. And I was a little shy at first about telling Rodney about Dave. But once I did, they got along great. And once Dean joined us, I told him about Rodney. But he didn't practice with us right away. But Dean got us a show way sooner than I thought than I expected. It was like, if I remember correctly, it was like within a month of us saying, yeah, Dean, let's be in this band. And then basically a week went by where Dave and Rodney and I were all trying to figure out better names for the band than the Dead Milkmen, as it seemed like, well, we're going to be a real band now. We're going to play a real show. We need a real name. But Dean came to the next practice with Dead Milkmen spray painted on all of his drum cases. And then he made a logo for us. It was the little cow thing. And we were like, well, we have to be the Dead Milkmen now. And Dean was like, what? You were thinking of changing the name? You can't change the name. That's a great name.
It is. So they were like the engine. So it was
engine, yeah.
I think that's really interesting. 'Cause the idea of like propelling something from like the fictional world into the real world.
They were the ones, yeah.
Yeah, it takes energy to do that. It takes it to also to overcome the shyness of that, to overcome the kind of like.
Yeah, I had stage fright for the first few shows for a while. It didn't even go away just because we started playing shows, but I got over it, and I was fortunate that Rodney was such a good natural front man. I didn't have to worry about doing anything except singing background vocals.
Are your parents shy people? Like, did you grow up in a house? Like, was your
not my dad. My dad never seemed shy to me. My mom seemed shy. I don't know. I can't go back that far to figure out why I was shy. What was the fear going on in my head? But I wasn't. I felt like I was two different people. I was shy out in public, but I was not shy in my safe space, which was in my neighborhood. So I was a different person with the people that I grew up with around in the immediate walking distance. But then in every other place, I was institutionally shy, I guess. I was shy at church, I was shy at school, I was shy anywhere we would go that wasn't the neighborhood.
What kind of person were you when you were with your friends in the neighborhood?
I don't know, I just like to play.
Yeah,
I get that. Games and stuff.
Yeah, I get that. I wish I could figure out what it was in me. Like, there was something where I was just like very insecure. I was kind of a weird kid. I mean, I'm still a weird person. I'm a weird adult. But like, I was kind of I was insecure about that when I was a kid. Now where I'm confidently weird and I'm okay being weird. And I guess it's part of being a comedian in some sense. But like, I could be weird around my friends, even though we were like, my friends roasted. We were like very into roasting each other. But I could still be weird around them.
Yeah.
In a way that I felt uncomfortable in other contexts.
You could take a ribbing from your friends and it wouldn't get to, you would say, oh, they're just my friends, whereas maybe that's part of it.
Yeah. I'm wondering if also, like, if Pennsylvania, this is why I like talking to people from Pennsylvania, because I'm like, in some way I wonder if, like, the Pennsylvania Dutch spirit kind of repressed me in some way in growing up in Pennsylvania.
Were you Amish?
No,
or
we're
you
Jewish.
Just knew Amish? Oh, Jewish. Okay, right.
But just like growing up there, like all my friends, even today, all my friends are very kind of like low key. They keep all their feelings like very close to the vest.
Yeah, there might be something to that.
I mean, it could also be like you and I grew up in different generations, and I think,
right, true.
As time goes on, you know, I've gotten more comfortable being myself or expressing my emotions.
That could be. I think as time goes on, everyone generally gets more comfortable expressing their emotions, maybe too comfortable after a while.
I mean, did you grow up in a family that was that was expressive like that?
Well, there's two different families because there's my dad's and my mom's. And my dad's was Italian, and they're very expressive. And my mom's, I guess they were somewhat more subdued. I wouldn't say repressed. Maybe that's too strong. But they were not Pennsylvania Dutch, although there's a little bit of that. They were more, what is it, Anglo? I don't know. Mm-hmm. So there's that.
So I'm getting more of a picture of like your dad, Italian, door-to-door salesman, like that kind of energy. Like I'm getting a picture of that kind of like what that's like.
Uh-huh.
So is he kind of like the focal point in your family?
Well, he's the guy most people, like, because he's a teacher, lots of people know him. I mean, the way the school system works, by the time you get intermediate and high school, intermediate, high, and high school, I'll know people who know my dad as a teacher, which is another role that I rarely got to see him in. But I knew that he was sort of famous as being a teacher, and he was well liked, one of the good teachers, I guess. And every now and then he still gets letters, even though he's like 93, from people who had wishing him well and saying thanking him.
So I mean, like there was when you have someone that boisterous in your family, there is a tendency, I think, maybe to hold back a little bit, or not hold back, but just like stay in the background.
Mm-hmm. I see.
I mean, look, this is armchair psychology. It's not.
There you go. But I had siblings too.
Oh, really? What was that dynamic like?
I had a sister who was pretty boisterous on her own, and a brother. My sister and brother were playmates. I was kind of a loner. I'm the oldest. And then I had an even younger brother. So bookended with brothers and a brother and sister in the middle.
Yeah, so it was a pretty big family.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a kind of like when you moved to Philly, is that like your chance to finally kind of like define yourself?
I feel like I was starting to define myself already in high school. But yeah, even further, I guess, refine. And to, be free of the fam.
I mean, what was that process like? I remember in high school, there was just some moment where I'm like, oh, I don't like the suburbs. I don't think I want this. I don't think I want to live here. I don't think I want this to be my life. And I started pushing against my parents. I was like maybe 15 or 16. I mean, like your typical teenage kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't want the suburbs to be my life either. I like Philadelphia. First, I like Philadelphia because you could just pretty much go anywhere on public transportation, and it wasn't that hard to do. And back then, movies were a big thing for me. I love movies. It's pre VHS period, or not really pre VHS, but pre anybody you knew had a VHS. Nobody you knew had a VHS. Mm. They were for rich people, I think, at this particular juncture. But yeah, the movie theaters were still a popular destination. I guess only because of the pandemic, they're not, but what am I trying to say? That I could just pretty much go see a movie every other night or something if I wanted to without, you don't have to have permission to do that.
Yeah. I mean, what movies were you seeing at the time? Like, what was it that grabbed you?
I would see any kind of comedy. I would see science fiction. What did I see? There's Star Trek movies were starting to come out. The Star Wars movies too. Mm. I liked Woody Allen movies. I don't remember all the specifics, but
so what are you making things in did you already start writing music in high school?
Yeah, that's when it started.
That's when you created the fake band.
Yeah.
To write music for.
Pretty much.
What made you want to do that in the first place? Like, instead of start your own band, you're right, well, I'm going to create this imaginary band that exists.
It's not too original of an idea, but I was into recording, like I was into music, I was into tape recording. I didn't start tape recording music my neighbor Garth and I first started tape recording comedy sketches that we came up with and would improvise for the entertainment of us to listen back to and our neighbors. Like we'd make tape programs based loosely, I guess, on the way Monty Python records work, because we had Monty Python records, and then played them on that said, okay, listen to this. And then, unfortunately, maybe fortunately, I guess, because tape was a rare commodity, we would just tape over the whole program and make a new one.
Yeah.
But we did that for at least a year before the idea came along that we could incorporate music that I maybe because I wasn't proficient enough even to play guitar for a while, and then once I got better and I said, I could play these songs, I could play these chords and these chords and these chords, and we can make funny songs now too, add to our repertoire, and then it became just songs. So that's how it evolved into songs. And because we already were being funny and that was our hook, we just kept at the funny aspect of it and made a funny backstory, which was expressed in the newsletter, which we actually mailed to people like Rodney. We got a few people from high school, we got their addresses, and I mailed it, because I love mail, I still do. I loved mail back then. And I like the idea of somebody getting a mimeograph thing that was completely ridiculous.
Yeah. So it was like an early zine.
It was a zine, yeah. I didn't even know what a zine was, but that's what it was. It was a newsletter with a Z. Yeah. We put a Z in it instead of an S.
It's interesting that it's like, I'm getting this picture of you, and, tell me how accurate this is, but kind of shy. This is the way you can express your humor. You can express yourself through this, and also like the idea of like having an alias. You can kind of in some way hide behind that alias.
Yeah, Garth and I had several aliases because we played multiple members of the band. We didn't actually play them, but we acted them out so that we could have a story to tell something about. And we would act them out a lot of times while playing cards. So
was it just Monty Python, or was there other? I'm trying to think back to like the 70s. Like I was a huge fan of the Monkees. Monkees were on in reruns when I was a child in the 80s.
Yeah, we kind of missed the Monkees rerun thing. But let me think, what other... There was a Saturday Night Live that still goes on.
I've seen it.
Of course you're familiar. So that was the other thing. What else was there going? There was something called Second City TV. Mm-hmm. That was in the 70s. And
yeah, I love SCTV.
We watched that. Carl Reiner, I had a record of his. It was fun to listen to. The 2,000-year-old man.
Mm-hmm. So it was really both these things, kind of like both these strands in you, kind of connecting into one thing.
Yeah.
Because I'm just trying to like chart this. I think it's really interesting. It's like once you are in Philly, and then these other members of the band come in, and they're really the energy that moves it from this kind of fictional thing to like a real band that plays out and writes real music.
Yeah, when I was in Wagontown, it was Garth. That was my neighbor, Garth and me. It was our thing. And then Garth took the tape we made that we finished on New Year's Eve 1979. We call it So Long 70s. To school with him and lent it to Rodney. I knew who Rodney was because I sat at his lunch table. But I don't think he knew who I was really, except this kid that just sat at his lunch table and listened to him talk, and I never said a word. But then he heard the tape that I was on because Garth gave it to him. They shared a journalism class together, and then I think it's the first time Rodney ever spoke to me, but he approached me while waiting for the bus after school and said, "Oh, I really like that tape, The Dead Milkmen. Tell me, when is your next recording session? I'd love to come play with you guys. I play banjo." And at that particular point, I didn't have anything planned. Like, we didn't have any more songs written or anything. But I said, well, what are you doing next weekend? And he came over and we had Garth over, and I had another friend of ours named Andrew. And it was like an experiment of let's just try to impromptuize some songs. Rodney has these lyrics and he brought his banjo, and we started. That was the birth of me bringing Rodney into the thing. The guy Andrew didn't last, and Garth eventually, both Andrew and Garth eventually joined the Air Force at different times, but interesting.
Oh, interesting.
But it left Rodney and me as songwriters together to further on the myth of the Dead Milkmen.
Do you think
I really thought that when I went to college it was that all that was done, because I killed off the main character of the band in the newsletter, but I brought him back.
So, I mean, I really don't know much about this. So there was a whole fictional world that you had built up.
Yeah, it's online. You can read it online.
Oh, really?
We put all this fictional, we made PDFs out of them.
So you kind of like lived in this fictional world a little bit, in the same way that like...
It's not unusual for me to live in fictional worlds. At least back then it wasn't. Because lots of kids do that, I think. Yeah.
But I mean, some people grow out of it. I never did. I always lived...
Okay, well, that's neat. What's your fictional world like? Or you don't have to say if it's private.
Well, now, I mean, like when I was a kid, I had built this entire world of... I had all these like little rubber toys and like action figures. Like I had taken action figures and I like painted that. Like I took like stuff from that, like, you know, in the early 80s, there was like a big boom of like merchandising, like not just Transformers, but there was like a whole bunch of like, I can't even remember the names of them, but you know, cartoons where they were just there to sell toys. But I would change them. I would like switch out their parts or like paint them to make them my own characters. And then I had these giant adventures with them with that continuity. So like whatever happened one day, if I picked it up like a week later, it was like whatever changes had happened still carried over. So it would be these long adventures that lasted years.
Wow.
Where the characters changed. And I mean, now I kind of do it for a living in a sense, you know, writing TV and movies and stuff.
Well, that served you well then. Or it's serving you well.
Well, yeah, maybe. We'll see. But like, I think that's really interesting, you know, especially like when I was a kid and I was kind of shy, like that's where I lived. That's where I could kind of be free, was in these like imaginary worlds.
Yeah.
And I'm
assuming it's safe.
Yeah. And I'm assuming it's the same kind of thing for you.
Yeah, it was. But it was I had imaginary worlds that were very private at first, but it was really great to have a friend, a neighbor Garth, his family moved in while I was in grade school. They moved across the street, very convenient. So it was great to have somebody else who would also propagate imaginary worlds with.
What was it about Garth that you guys got along so well, and you could create these imaginary worlds together?
I don't know. I do know I was very happy when he moved in, and it just seemed like it was an instant friend thing.
Yeah, I get that. There's this kind of like, again, as a weird kid, once I found other people who were on the same wavelength as me, it was a relief.
Yeah, because before that, although I wasn't shy in the neighborhood, I didn't have a connection with anybody else the way with him.
Yeah.
It's like having a best friend. Yeah.
I mean, did you guys stay in touch after he went into the Air Force?
Yeah, we're still in touch.
That's great. I don't know what it is about the suburbs. That's why I kind of asked about like community or the suburbs or that, but because especially like as a weird kid, it was really tough to have those connections with other people. And like I had some very good friends, but it wasn't until like I found like my best friend in 9th grade where we were just like, it's like it was one of those friendships. I mean, we're still friends, right? But it's one of those friendships where like we just sat there just like quoting The Simpsons back and forth to each other. And those would be entire conversations.
Yeah, that's fun. I had a friend like that I also met in ninth grade, who was the only other Beatles maniac fan that I knew of in high school. And we became fast friends too. And he liked to go to movies. He liked to see old movies, not just the ones that were out, like Humphrey Bogart and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I wonder if that's something too, like, were you also into like older, not just like the Beatles, but things that like were like from the 50s or the 40s?
Yes, I was. I was interested in popular culture from previous decades.
Because I think that like when I was a kid, I had a very expansive cultural knowledge that other kids, I don't know if it was just like growing up in my household, you know, with my I had my parents' record collection. I had,
yeah.
You know, there was a lot of stuff around that was like, you know, my grandmother, was there, and I could talk to her, and I just like knew about Humphrey Bogart in, 1986. Whereas none of my friends knew anything about a movie that was, older than The Goonies or something like that. And
yeah.
I think that was something that like kind of made me that kind of like was alienating a little bit. That I had this like large knowledge that my friends didn't have, and so it was tough to connect with them sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of like the connections that I had was based on the kind of movies you like, the kind of records you listen to. And I didn't really click with the people who were listening to the current music and stuff, but for some reason I did click with a smaller group of people who were into what I was into. And part of, I guess, why I was into it was them. So, for example, because I like the Beatles so much, and I hung out with my friend, he likely got me into wanting to see the Maltese Falcon and stuff like that. So I sought out more information on it and said, this is pretty cool.
So the Beatles were really like a kind of like doorway into like a more expansive world. In
a way. And when I was in the 70s going to high school, it didn't seem they were the nerdiest thing in the world. They weren't cool at all.
Really?
I mean, it's hard to explain to people. I mean, it shouldn't be hard to explain. You can, it was like not even a decade since they were contemporary. And it was much cooler to say you listened to David Bowie, like, oh, Station to Station, such an awesome album, rather than to say, oh, I listened to Abbey Road last night with headphones on.
Really? That's so weird.
That's the 70s for you, at least in Coatesville High School. It was cool to admit that you liked Steely Dan back then.
Really? Steely Dan, which is like one of the nerdiest bands to like now.
Now it seems that way. I don't know. I might be misremembering, but Led Zeppelin was cool to like, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, there's this kind of like, it's weird how like culture, again, I'm only accessing this through like talking to people or from movies or something like that, but like it felt like in the 70s, you went from this kind of like pop sensibility that was the Beatles and the kind of like expansive, like, in my mind,
Rush was cool in our high school, that band from Canada.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like when I was growing up, like Rush was the music nerds, the guys in band, like the drummers that played in the school band were really into like prog and Rush.
Well, I felt like everybody was into that prog music except me. I just thought that's the way it was in high school, except for a small group of people who liked the 60s better for some stupid reason. I tried to get people to like the Ramones when I first heard them, and it was like pulling teeth. No one would like them. Not even my Beatles friends.
I mean, was it that the Beatles, there was something more hopeful about the pop music of the 60s?
Maybe that's why. Yeah, the 70s were pretty down. I didn't smoke pot back then either. Maybe that was my problem, and if I did, maybe I would have got the music.
We're right at the end of the show. I just want one more question. I'm trying to think about, a pretty shy, kind of introverted person, through the like process of like becoming like a real band, right? How do you think that changed you as a person?
It focused me, because where I was still going to college, and my focus was on my studies, and in the very last, I guess, semester, when was 1980, we started playing shows in 1983, so it was the last year, I guess. I still finished college, but my focus became more and more on music, and that became my priority, and not so much I want to get a job in the media world. Now I didn't care about that so much, and just said I'll just get whatever job that I can support myself with, and focus on the band as something that could maybe be a viable thing.
So it made you, it really did change the direction of your life.
Yes.
Like, otherwise you would have, like, what do you think you would have done otherwise? Just gone into, like, what did you want to,
what did you become a writer? I didn't know what I wanted to do exactly, but the job I ended up having was a library technician job, because it's sort of like a job that fell into my lap. But what would I have done as a career? When I first went to Temple, I was interested in making films or maybe a TV show or something. That was honestly what I thought I could maybe do. That's just maybe even hard. That's not the easiest thing to get into either. But I wanted to do something creative like that. That's what I had my eye on. And I did focus a lot of energy into student projects and stuff in our TV media classes and film class pre-band.
Yeah. Were your parents supportive of you doing creative things?
Yeah.
That's cool.
All the way. They let me use my dad let me use his camera. I got to use the movie camera to make stupid films. I had to buy my own film. I had to pay for it to be developed, but I got the use of that stuff.
That's great. Mm-hmm. Joe, thank you so much for talking to me.
You're welcome. Thanks for talking to me, Andrew.
Yeah, of course. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye. Bye.